Good morning. The Ohio History Connection is honored to host this morning's CEO Insights program, and on behalf of our Board of Trustees and CEO Megan Wood, welcome to the Ohio History Center. This site is the center of operations for the 59 sites of history and culture that we steward across the state. Our mission is to embrace the present, share the past, and transform the future. It is a mission we cannot do alone. We work together with communities, businesses, government entities, and leaders to ensure we are sharing the authentic, relevant, and inclusive stories of our state. This campus includes this museum, our archives library, the State Historic Preservation Office, the Ohio Village Historic Experience, and we just broke ground on a new collections facility that will help us preserve over 2 million artifacts that tell the compelling story of this land we call Ohio. These conversations initiated by the Columbus Chamber are essential to keeping all of us moving forward and making sure no one is left behind. We are grateful that we can be a place where the stories shared in these interviews can continue to positively impact the economy and communities of Central Ohio and beyond. Thank you all for coming and participating in this program this morning. Thank you to the Columbus Chamber of Commerce for making this happen. Now I would like to introduce Don DePero, our President and CEO of the Columbus Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. And that was Anthony Gibbs from the Ohio History Connection. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks so much. Welcome to our Columbus Chamber of Commerce's CEO Insights series. We're thrilled to welcome everyone here today at the Ohio History Connection. Thanks for joining us. A special thank you to our 2022 CEO Insights partners. We appreciate your continued support of these phenomenal conversations. They're wonderful. I'm not here to introduce our speaker and our interviewer, but I always like to thank Colleen Marshall. I used to say that Colleen was Columbus's preeminent broadcast journalist, but I think these days, Colleen is Columbus's preeminent journalist. She's just fabulous. And Matt Habash just embodies the definition of a public servant. He's an amazing guy. We've been friends many, many years, and everything he does is not only from his head, but from his heart. Wonderful. So to begin this morning's program, I'd like to introduce Bob Woolley, a partner with Plante Moran. Bob.
Good morning. Welcome to the Columbus Chamber CEO's Insights series. I'm Bob Woolley, a tax partner at Plante Moran, a longstanding partner of the CEO Insights series. Plante Moran's a full-service accounting, tax, and business advisory firm, and with the end of 2022 only a month and a half away, sorry about that, we're moving fully into our planning season, including both tax planning as well as engagement planning for financial statement clients. With planning being such an important part of what we do, this is an extremely important season for us, and we look forward to working with our clients to close out 2022. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Matt Habash, the current president and CEO for the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, to our stage here at the Ohio History Connection. As a reminder, we'll be picking 5 random registrants from today's program to present Crimson Cup coffee and tea gift cards. Thank you to Greg Hubert and his team at Crimson Cup for this generous gift. Be sure to stick around for our closing comments from Bill Nolan this morning as he'll introduce the winners. I'd now like to welcome Jennifer Griffith, Regional President of First Merchants Bank, to introduce Matt. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Always pleased to be with you this morning, representing First Merchants Bank. We've been a presenting sponsor of CEO Insights since its inception. It's been an incredible program. The Chamber's done a remarkable, remarkable job. We had the opportunity to talk a little bit about ourselves and why sponsorship matters to us. And when I think about our connection to the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, I reflect on First Merchants' desire to help our communities prosper. And the CEO of our company, Mr. Mark Hardwick, has landed on the word prosperity in a really meaningful way. And that prosperity means an awful lot to the communities we serve, the diverse communities that we serve across 4 states, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and the Great Ohio. And so when we think about prosperity in the banking industry, we tend to think about, interest, right? Don't charge too much and please pay more. And that's not what we do. It is what we do, but it's what all banks do. What makes banks unique, what makes us different, what makes us interesting is the heart of the team that serves the communities. And in doing so, we're able to elevate prosperity across many different disciplines and platforms that might include your checking account, but might not. Yesterday, we had 6 teammates that were at the Mid-Ohio Food Collective that were packing and sorting. We tend to send individuals to go man the telephones when it's double your donation day. Zoe Sellers, who's our executive admin, she makes sure we never, ever, ever contribute unless it's double your donation day. Forget it. She's very quite particular about that. We run campaigns. We have bake sales and food sales, and we talk about what food instability might mean in any of the communities that we serve, and it means the world to us. So we think about prosperity, and I hope if you think about where you might play in Columbus, Ohio, it might be to also elevate our neighbors and participate in the prosperity that's ours. And so over the years, Matt Habash became the executive director of the Mid-Ohio Foodbank back in 1984. And prior to that, he was with the St. Stephen's Community House, if you're familiar with that, incredible. First, he was there as a youth worker and as the assistant to the executive director. Matt was also a member of our Columbus City Council from 93 to 2006, serving as our council president from 99 to 6. And as our council president, Matt governed the civility and the humanity. Co-chair with Columbus Mayor Michael Coleman, Matt led the 21st Century Growth Initiative. It was a plan that was designed to balance job creation and sustainable neighborhood development. And then there were other efforts that have been spearheaded by Matt in his role as the council president. It included the 315 Research Corridor. It included the city's Indoor Clean Air Act and the city's Bike Path Plan. He holds a Master's of Business Administration from Xavier, a Master's of Public Policy from our Ohio State University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy as well from Xavier University. And I hope everyone can please join me today in welcoming Ms. Colleen Marshall and Matt Habash to join us up here on the stage.
We were back there talking about pizza.
Food.
Yeah, Matt only wants to talk about food. Good morning, everyone, and welcome, of course, to Matt Habash. So Matt and I learned that we started here in Columbus a few months apart back in 1984. And just, can you even describe how the volume, the size, the mission of the food bank, and now it's the Food Collective, but how it has evolved? Give us your elevator speech since 1984.
Well, when I started in 1984, I'd come from St. Stephen's Community House, where I spent 6 years with somebody that was a big influence on me, John Maloney, who ran St. Stephen's. But I had 6 employees and a couple Vista workers. We're now over 170 employees, and I think I have something like 30 openings or something like that as well. So. But it's kind of one of those good news, bad news stories. You know, the good news is we've grown and we've evolved. And when I started, we were giving out about 3 million pounds of food a year. And at the height of COVID, we were at 84 million pounds of food a year. That's the good news is we had food. The bad news is the problem has continued to get worse. And I often say that I wanted to go out of business. If you read the original Dispatch article when I got hired, I had a lot of hair and a beard. When I got hired, I said my dream was to go out of business. And I keep telling everybody I failed miserably at my life's goal because we're not going out of business anytime soon.
Something that surprised me that you said backstage is that you actually have more demand now than you did during the height of COVID. Mm-hmm. What do you attribute that to? Well,
it's a combination of, I think, of a perfect storm when you think about the fact that there were a lot of benefits, the stimulus checks. Probably the worst thing we did was end the child tax credit for a lot of people. It was really helping a lot of families. $300 a month kind of thing was a lifesaver to families that have kids. And that all ended. All those other checks ended, the benefits ended, with the exception of emergency food stamps, everything's ended, and at the same time then inflation happens. And so it was a combination of those two things. people tell people, go get a job. And I said, well, they already have two. What do you want them to do? Wages went up, but if wages go up just enough, they throw you off the benefit cliff. You lose a lot of other benefits. So it's a combination. It's a real difficult decision for a lot of people. But we're 25% higher in the number of people we're serving now than we were at the peak of COVID. The scary part in all this is and I said this recently in this past year, that all the 38 years I've been doing this, I never worried about food. This year, I worried about food, and it's because of the supply chain challenges. And we've had 83 tractor trailer loads this past year canceled, from the USDA. I mean, basically, I had 11 loads of cereal canceled about 4 weeks ago that we were counting on for the next couple months to have, and it disappears. And so the fact that all during the beginning of COVID, we spent $5 million that we didn't have to buy food, to have it in, to get ready, because we knew the federal government food was going to come to help. And it was down the road, but it was going to take 4 to 6 months before it came. And now we're in a situation where there's nothing, there's dollars there. They just approved in that White House conference on hunger, another $1 billion for food banking. But I'm like, what can you buy right now? And that's the challenge right now. So we got more need, and we're giving out less food per person coming to get it.
Well, let's talk logistically about your operation. You cover quite a bit of central going into eastern Ohio, 20 counties, I think you said. So just logistically, how you have that huge warehouse, but it goes out in so many directions. Like, what's your network like on a daily basis of trying to get food out to people in need?
Well, we've got about 700 partners that we work with across the 20-county footprint. Most of them are very tiny, think very small churches. About 70% of them are all volunteer-run, faith-based organizations. So that's the heart and soul of a lot of what happens is we got volunteers willing to do the things that we're doing. We've got some very big operations. We run a distribution out of the food bank in Grove City, and it's 700 to 900 cars a day coming through there to get food. We're still in COVID response. We're not back into the shopping inside. We put it in the trunk of your car kind of thing. And we can't really go back into the inside shopping because there's so many people coming that we're doing that. We opened a market on the west side, this new strategy called Mid-Ohio Markets, and it really is around rebranding food pantries, putting them in grocery store kind of experiences, shopping experience, getting to pick your own food. And the idea was a lot of the food we're giving out now is fresh. It's like 65% fresh food, and so we wanted people coming more often, but come take what you can use, which is different than for years and years. Food pantries gave out a 3 to 5 day supply of food. You hold out your begging cup, we pour food in, we hope we never see you again because we solved all your problems. That was kind of the mantra of this whole thing, help people just when they're out of food. The reality of it is that's not the way it works, and the reality is most of our surplus food, which is the heart and soul of food banking, is fresh produce. And none of us eat our produce once a month, or as one of my staff members called it, it's the crisper of good intentions. We all have one in our refrigerator. So it's in that space that we've had to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, like how many days do I have to leave this in here before I can throw it out?
I'm looking at my wife.
husband bought kale. We're not going to eat that.
We happen to love kale, so we do really well. And Kim makes wonderful soup, or crisp it up and makes really good chips if you're on diets and want to eat kale chips. But it's a change in our model, and so we're really now looking at centralized, bigger sites. So we've got about 5 big Mid-Ohio markets. First one was in Reynoldsburg, Columbus State's campus. We opened this one on Norton Road on the far west side. We'll have one at the food bank. We're looking at Northland. There's a number of these.
So how does that work? People come in. I mean, I've seen how it works, but essentially, you're right. They don't come in and you hand them a bag of food. Are they limited on how much, or how does it work?
Well, the idea was, for us, if we could make this work, where it's challenging is at Norton Road. When we opened that in March, within a matter of a few weeks, it was the second largest distribution in our 20 counties outside of the one we do at the food bank in Grove City. And it was like, okay, this wasn't what it was designed to do. 2-hour waits. None of us would wait outside the grocery store for 2 hours unless you were looking for toilet paper during the pandemic. You might wait. But outside of that, you're not going to do that. And so that's the unfortunate part. It got too busy too fast. But it was a shopping experience. Come in and pick your own foods. Take the foods that you can use. We're getting better at trying to be very culturally relevant. We've got a very large Bhutanese Nepali community in Reynoldsburg, so for us, we got a lot of lentils during the Trump trade mitigation wars, and they couldn't sell the stuff overseas. Fortunately for us, that's a staple, and the Bhutanese Nepali community used a lot of it. The West Side's Hispanic, it's 70% Hispanic, so we're trying to find the right foods to put in there. But the idea is let people shop, take what they can use, telling them they can come back, so you don't have to take too much. And in our experience, even when we run an online order fulfillment process and we were testing that, people didn't take everything they could have. They took what they needed and what they used with the idea that I'm going to leave something for somebody else. So it really is it works really well.
So whose job is it to ethnically and geographically figure out the distribution process? You mentioned, Hispanic food on the West Side, it's going to be different than Nepalese. How do you do that? Who does that?
Well, we've got an agency advisory council. We talk to our customers. We call them customers instead of clients. We want you coming back, idea. And we talk to our customers a lot, in terms of what are you looking for? What can we help that we can source? Now, you got to remember, in the best of all worlds of food banking, we started in the 1970s. It was literally one man's idea in Phoenix, Arizona. The St. Mary's Food Bank exists today that was collecting more food at his parish than he could use. And the pastor said, you got to do something. So he got a warehouse and started redistributing it to other charities in Phoenix. That's the birth of what was then called Second Harvest, now called Feeding America, the national network of food banks. So it was a birth from that kind of idea. But in those days, it was a lot of dry packaged good products, and so that's what we got. And we got called the lapdogs of the food industry at some point because we were getting all the test marketed failures and all the stuff that wasn't particularly healthy. Well, food banking has evolved in this surplus world, and now that product dried up. Basically as food companies got efficient consumer response, just-in-time inventory, really good tracking systems. They used to say back 10 years ago, Walmart knew the sales of every store every 15 minutes. Now they know instantaneously. So they're much better at logistics planning. They don't have big warehouses sitting with a lot of food that they used to have back in the day. So we shifted, and we got asked in 2010, when we opened our new building in Grove City, to lead the national effort to find the next 1 billion pounds of surplus fresh produce in the country. And I said, why do you want a Midwestern food bank to do that? All the food's in California, Texas, New York, Florida, those kinds of the growing states. And they said, well, exactly, because they know how to do that. They expect them to do it. If we do it in the Midwest, then all the food banks will understand that, how do you get fresh food? So we changed our entire business model in the last 10 years to a really fresh food distribution. So it had to put this in just-in-time kind of thing, get it there for a customer to take what they can use, teach them that. But you had to break through the idea that, we want you coming more often. We want you coming when you need help, not just at the end of the month when you're supposedly out of everything, because that model won't work if you're giving out fresh food. Or it won't your milk won't taste very good if you got it in the refrigerator for 30 days, that kind of thing. So how do we really do this differently?
At NBC4, we had this big lot, as you were well aware, back behind the station. It was just property that we owned in a neighborhood with that really has become a lot of immigrant families live there, many of them coming to Ohio State to study, many of them also needing food. And so we partnered with you, with the food bank, to do this garden that people in the neighborhood, it's a community garden, help run, and it's with these pods that are on top of each other. So I know this is a new and emerging thing, so explain to us how this works, because I'm still confused. I look at those things and think, how much food can grow in those pots that are on top of each other? But it's a lot, isn't it?
It is. What we started, I got asked to get into the urban farming world several years ago on the south side, so we ran a farm with the question of, can you make urban farming sustainable? And we answered that question, no. Not from a 3-acre site on the south side where you can't control for water issues, you can't control for bug issues. We were trying to do organic type of growing practices, so we were at the mercy of the weather and a variety of things. Then we got kicked off the land because we didn't control the land, at the time, and the school wanted to do something different with it. So we went onto the hilltop, and we had a second farm we were starting up there, which was an old 22-acre site that now houses both a senior housing and affordable housing complex and a health center, and we have the 7 acres in there. So we started with the idea, and we actually have a Southern Florida farmer, who was into vertical growing, all things urban ag, growing vertically, greenhouse, new technology type of way of thinking, not growing in the ground. And so to answer your question, on a fifth of an acre, we can grow 5 acres worth of greens if we grow them in these vertical towers. The other neat thing was it needed water twice a day for 5 minutes. It was a drip system that dripped through think styrofoam flower pots stacked in a 5-gallon drum, literally stacked up, water dripping through them. The medium wasn't even dirt that's in those things, but they produce a lot. And so we took that. Ken was showing me pictures last night at an event I was at, the general manager, really was his dream to do that behind Channel 4. And we were able to start there with the idea we can grow differently, and you're not at the mercy of the weather as much. You can control things a lot differently. And there's a lot of international families that live in all those apartments, and they all got wonderful greens, kale, all kinds of Swiss chard, leafy vegetables, kind of things that we grew in those. So we're going to expand that. The one on the hilltop will be our edu-farm. It'll literally have greenhouses on it. It'll have high tunnels on it. We actually put high tunnels now, I think, on the Channel 4 site as well. With the idea that we can grow longer, we can grow indoor, experiment with hydroponics, and then teach others how to do that. You can take one of these growing towers and put it on your patio, and you could grow some of your own food in. You can actually grow root vegetables in the 5-gallon tub if you wanted to, in addition to all the leafy greens and vegetables you can grow. So the idea is to teach people how to do it, use it as an education system with the Columbus school system. We've done a lot of work with them. They have a wonderful team of people that do things, and they have a garden on top of Linda McKinley School. So that's working with them as well, working with the Highland Youth Garden, in terms of teaching people new ways to do this, because, urban farming is hard. Community gardens are hard. Usually it's a champion that does it, and when the champion stops or gets tired or moves away, it becomes a wheat field, or you can't get water easily onto the site. So a lot of challenges, but I think this is a way to really use it as an farm and to really teach people how to do things differently.
I can remember as a kid, and I grew up in Appalachia, and there wasn't really, like we would think of today, these food distribution systems, but there was a certain sense of shame if you had to, like at Christmas time, get food from a church, or take that basket from someone. And how do you deal with that today? Or is there still that same sense of, I don't want people to know that I have to get food from someone else, that I can't provide this for my family?
I think that's very real. We've worked really hard over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I'm looking at the team in front of me, in terms of reducing stigma. That's the reason we want to get into, a grocery store experience versus, a church basement kind of thing. That the idea is make this dignified, make it look like a grocery store, give people the opportunity to come in, shop for the things they need. So it's a much more dignified experience. Now, I'm hoping to get enough open that I can reduce these wait times, that we literally let people shop, let people pick the food they want. Handing somebody a bag of food, the odds are there's something in there they're not going to eat, they don't like, they're allergic to, and it gets wasted. And the last thing, we call it right place, right time, right food. Venn diagram, 3 circles. How do we hit that sweet spot with really maximizing the amount of food that we can put out to serve the most people, as opposed to just pushing a bunch of surplus food at people and hoping they use it. So it's a much different logistical challenge today, but the idea is to reduce that stigma, because we want you coming back, so it's why we use the term customer. So how do we give really good, learning from our corporate partners, what does really good customer service look like? That's a different model than I hope I never see you again because I gave you a bag of food. So it's a big transformation in our thinking. So, I've got wonderful board members who teach us from the Kroger and customer service world in terms of how do we give a really good experience while there. And then the enhancement of this, it goes back to your original question as to what's changed. When I started, our mission was to find food and other grocery products and get it to other 501c3s, who are serving the needy, and small a advocacy, education kind of things. But it was really the customer was the partner agency. And back in 2012, I gave a speech to the national network, and it really came out of a board meeting that we had in terms of the question we asked our board: if all of our agency partners went out of business, would the general public think we were out of business? And our board wrestled with that question for a while during the retreat, and they came back and said, no, they're your current distribution model, create a new one. And it freed us, from the model, but it also answered the question, who's our customer? We only exist because there are hungry people. We don't exist to serve other nonprofits. So the mission today is ending hunger one nourishing meal at a time while co-creating a community where everyone thrives. So it's that compound piece of this. So it's a yes-in thinking strategy that that we've been living through. And it really is about, okay, we're not going to food bank our way out of a hunger problem. At the end of the day, we did missing meal index research, and we were missing 145 million meals a year. When you look at people's money, government support, charity care, and what's the gap? And so we said, well, we're not going to food bank our way out of this, so we've got to go upstream and help address the root causes. We started, 8-9 years ago, raising wages to $15 an hour at the food bank and challenged other people to say, if you want to move people out of poverty, the only measurement of success is their income went up, because that's what you're measuring. It's income/household size. That's the measurement. So if you want to move people out of poverty, you want to reduce the 400,000 people in Franklin County who live below 200% of poverty, their income has to go up. But if you go up, you can also fall off a benefit cliff. You can lose, and that's why people don't make decisions to take raises and other things, because they lose child care, they lose housing support, they lose food stamps, and SNAP as it's now called. You fall back down. We just had the Federal Reserve come to our board retreat because they study the benefit cliff and present all that. They really show people, while you think you're putting them on a path for their income decline, they fall benefit-wise. And somehow we've got to reinvent this system where we're in partnership with business to say the benefits track with you. They may be at a reduced rate, but they continue to track so that you can allow people to build wealth. If we're not allowing people to build wealth, at the end of the day, we're going to be stuck with what we have. And the numbers are worse now. Housing prices, everything else is escalating. So we're in a situation, if we don't rethink this, America's heading towards a path where, we're going to have more than half of America, struggling. They talked about 40% of America couldn't pay a $400 emergency bill. And the guy from the Federal Reserve actually showed us up through 20, through what the benefits, that was getting better. That people actually, then I said, yeah, wait till you get your 21, 22 data and watch that thing skyrocket again. But, in the next 20%, we're borrowing from somewhere. So we got more than half of America can't pay one $400 emergency bill with their own savings. And so that's the situation we're in, where the gaps are getting wider, the wealth gap's getting wider, the income gap's getting wider, which makes the job much harder. So
you talked about the income gap and this push for $15 an hour. The Ohio Policy, I think it's the Ohio Policy Center, something like that, had a study that they put out a week or so ago that said in the last census, most of Ohio, the population went down by about 5,000, and the number of workers went down significantly. In central Ohio, went up a couple 100,000. And the workforce went up significantly. We don't have the housing stock to support that. So the people that you are seeing, how closely is it tied to they can't find affordable housing, they're paying more than they can afford for even an apartment now in central Ohio? How much is the housing crunch tied to people not being able to feed themselves?
I think it's the number one issue. People ask me in my housing partners in the nonprofit world love me because I say, what's the number one issue? I say housing, and they say, well, you're the food guy. And I said, yeah, but housing's the number one issue. At the end of the day, if you want to stabilize a family, they've got to be in a place where they can afford to live. Now, I would submit to you, we're now seeing 50, 60%, 70% of people's budgets being spent on just basic housing. I would submit to anybody in this room, if I tell you, you got to go you're now going to pay 70% of your income on your housing, you're going to be redoing your budget in a hurry, because it's going to impact everybody. So that's the situation that the folks are in. And I remember even in my city council days, and I've been off city council since 07, we were talking about the underbuilding of housing that was going on. And it's anywhere from 9,000 to 14,000 housing units a year, and that compounds every year, in terms of, what's needed. And I can tell you, I lived through 14 painful years of rezonings, when every time you tried to rezone, if you tried to put an affordable housing apartment complex somewhere, people came unglued. I used to joke, if you want to put anybody with sex offenders, you got to put them on Mars, because nobody wanted to address these issues, but the reality is we need to build a lot more housing than we are. We've got to rethink when I ask people the best neighborhoods in Columbus, it's the older neighborhoods, which has very dense housing. If you start talking about Clintonville and Worthington and Bexley, they're not 2 units to an acre. They're, not 4 units to an acre, but when you get to the outer belt, that's where a lot of the city councils and the thing was saying limit it. And I say, well, it just spreads everybody out, which just raises the infrastructure cost to government. So how do you constrict that in a way and really make bus service, how are we gonna get everybody to Intel? They need all those workers and they're in Licking County, so we got those kind of logistical challenges are real. So, but, from the world of somebody that's struggling, housing's the number 1 issue. If you can't pay your housing bill, or afford your house, then you're gonna struggle with everything else in your budget. The most variable thing is food. At the end of the day, it's the thing you can vary the most, which makes it so hard right now because of inflation. Everybody's numbers, I got friends in my neighborhood that are just complaining about what they're paying, and I'm like, you all got money, kind of thing, but they're complaining. So imagine somebody that's on a very fixed income and we're watching gasoline prices go up the way they are, and you're watching food prices go up 13%. It's really hard. And I think that's the reason we're encouraging people to say, use our services, make sure you're paying your rent, pay your utility bills, buy your kid the clothes they need, et cetera. Come get food, because food is available, or at least it was until the last supply chain challenge.
But we're talking about challenges here in the urban corridor, but you have to deal with distribution and challenges as well in outlying counties. I think you said if you'd go right along I-70, you would go through what your distribution, what your zone is. And tell me again, how many food banks are there, or food centers like yours?
There's actually 13 food banks in Ohio. Toledo has an independent. There are 12 Feeding America food banks. We're the largest by far. Cleveland, Akron, Youngstown, Lorain, Lima, southeastern Ohio, Toledo. There's actually Dayton, Fairfield, and Cincinnati in the southwest. So there's food banking's local, as I tell people. If somebody decides they want to have a warehouse and redistribute food, then they got started. And there's 200 food banks in Feeding America. 12 of them are in Ohio, which is probably too many food banks, for what's needed. But we have 20 counties, and at one point in my tenure, we had 51 counties. We went from Toledo. We kind of followed Kroger's original market plan when they set up food banking. It was kind of diagonally, it was the Southwest. We came from Michigan all the way down to Wheeling, kind of thing, and then there was a north, east corridor before Kroger pulled out years and years ago out of Cleveland. So that's how food banking got set up. So we had a boundary that went from Toledo all the way through down to Steubenville. Kind of thing. So, but when you get into the other 19 counties, we're really trying to perfect and develop a hub and spoke model, because there's not enough infrastructure out there to handle it. And we're really doing a deep dive. Now, we started years ago in community conversations, listening to the people in those communities, helping them co-create their own strategy. Because you always got to remember, I remember from my political days, coming out of Columbus, you were the big bad Columbus who gets everything, all the government support, everything else. And when you come out of there, the food bank carries that same image. And so, well, we all have a lot of credibility in central Ohio. You get to eastern Ohio and they're like, Mid-Ohio who? Because they know their agency, but they don't know that most of the food that agency is giving out came from us. And so we're working on co-creating strategies in those counties to have stronger support by the community. We have all the data that can tell the story, so we're really trying to perfect it. We started with a cross-functional team at the food bank in Cambridge, and we're getting great support from a county commissioner out there, so we think we'll make inroads. We're up in Knox County doing the same thing. But it's an idea that can you have a centralized market and then have a hub and spoke delivery system, get out into the smaller parts of the county, create smaller, centralized place where we put the produce and the little agencies come pick it up. They don't have to drive to Columbus. Or, we're not taking, too much produce to a small agency. It's a logistical challenge, particularly with the quality and the type of food we're now dealing with, because it really is just-in-time kind of delivery.
Yeah, you have the same challenges, really, that any grocery distribution system would have.
Mm-hmm. We learn a lot from them. Very, very helpful.
This is the Chamber's CEO Legacy Series, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about your management philosophy. You have 170 people who work for you. How would you describe yourself or characterize the way you manage people?
I'm a firm believer in empowering. I've got an amazing leadership team, and empowering them and getting out of their way. I've got folks, Dave Daniel works for us as our head of food sourcing. He ran Giant Eagle here. So, I mean, you bring somebody in at that level. Rob Camp's out of the frozen food, White Castle. You know, we've got the biggest agency partner, our agencies, you know, our fundraising team, development team. We have a Stratton innovation team that, you know, came out really out of it, singularity and a lot of forward thinking, you know, what's technology going to do to drive the future? So empowering them to really work. So I operate on a very much a hands-off, you guys empower you, make clear. We work hard at vertical integration and clarity of goals, which is not easy, because we've gotten more and more spread out. You know, we run a restaurant in the Reeve Avenue Center and are feeding daycare kids down there. We now have these other locations. I've got Eastern Ohio employees, so it's much harder than it was when we were all in one building. But it's the idea is to really let them manage their areas, give them as much time as they need to develop what they need to develop, and then they're working really hard at building an effective team. You know, it's one thing to have a lot of great independent leaders, but they can butt heads, you know, as opposed to, and I don't like playing referee all the time, so empowering them to really work it out. So that's really been, and then how does that come down and feed up? We're really big on, you know, our truck drivers are our ambassadors. They're the ones that are out talking to our agencies, dropping off the food. So they're invaluable in giving back information about, hey, or so-and-so's left an organization, because you got 700 partners, and we're in the world of employee change and volunteer retirement and all these issues. So how do we stay abreast? And it really is, how do you empower those folks to you know, really come and have a voice and a decision in what we're doing?
Well, one of the things we were talking about before we came out here is how difficult it is to recruit and retain, especially young people right now. So, you know, you're a nonprofit. It's not like you're offering these six-figure salaries to everyone when they come in. So how do you compete against the private sector to get people? You know, you mentioned people from Giant Eagle, people from White Castle. How are you competing with the private sector when the private sector right now is having so much trouble retaining people? We have 2 school systems who don't have enough bus drivers, to the point that they're doing remote learning because they can't get kids to school. How are you doing it?
Well, we're struggling like everybody else. I think I have 7 openings in my kitchen, and it's daytime work. You know, you don't have nights and weekends the way you do it, you know, in the food retail industry kind of thing. So I think the challenge for us is this combination of, we really try to find people who believe in the passion of what we're doing, but I think we've got to reinvent this. I mean, I was talking to our you know, senior HR person yesterday and my board about, how do you rethink work? You know, we're all getting challenged with that. I mean, we've went through a long, laborious hybrid work. I separated hybrid and COVID. What's COVID issues and what were hybrid work issues that came out of COVID, and how do you live in that space? And we live, you know, jokingly say we live in the world of concrete and carpet too. So the concrete crowd has to be there full time, and they think the carpet crowd doesn't work because they're working from home. You know, so you got that dynamic, you know, but really, you know, but it's, and then you got a younger generation, no offense to the younger people in the room, but I tell people, we keep you 18 months, we're happy. You know, it's hard to retain people. So the passion, you know, for the work is a part of it, but I think we've got to rethink. Where we've had success is getting people who, you know, have retired from a job or taken an early buyout from a job, and then all of a sudden, you know, they have a lot to contribute. Can we bring them in? Can we co-share jobs? And I tell everybody, the secretarial pool doesn't exist anymore, so it can't be co-sharing jobs at that level, but could you co-share my job as a way of future thinking? You know, it's an inside-outside job. It's a $150 million operation, and it's relationship building, fundraising on the other side, and, you know, community work. So how do you, we got to think differently, because there is a big, you talk about the Great Resignation. There's a big resignation article that was just in Chronicle of Philanthropy talking about the great CEO nonprofit resignation. You've seen that. You know, we've got the Y just announced a new director. Shelter Board probably will announce a new director here shortly. Future Ready's got it. We've got more nonprofits CEOs leaving. And I tell my corporate friends who want to get into this space, the job's not as easy as you think. You know, they think it's nonprofit is easy, and I said, yeah, wait till you come in and try to do this job, and then you realize you don't have the resources you had at your beck and call when you were in the corporate community. So it's hard, but you find people that want to do it. So I think the future of a lot of this is, how do we tap all the people who take their 401ks and retired, who still have something to contribute, but may only want to work 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. You know, we let this talent disappear, and they don't all go to Florida and play golf. So how do we invite them back in differently? And I think that, to me, is something we're going to have to, because we can't compete on price. At the end of the day, we're not, we pay well, and we're one of the bigger nonprofits, but at the end of the day, we still can't compete. And, salaries keep going up, we're not, the talent you need, because I think the nonprofit work is getting harder. The burnout in the nonprofit world right now is real. I mean, we're all going through the mental health stress of COVID, and now COVID just seems like it's going on forever, and now we've got all of the inflationary stuff that just kind of kept that going. But in the world of nonprofits, we're busier during down times. When they talk about a recession coming after the first of the year, if that hits, we're going to be busier than we were. And so there's employment, but it's also burnout. When you're trying to deal with problems, it seems insurmountable.
How did COVID affect the way that you operate? I mean, everybody else shut down, stayed at home. Well, you couldn't do that. So how did you keep people safe who work for you, as well as connect with your clients?
Well, it was a couple things. One is I got real concerned when I heard the governor say he was going to shut down the Arnold before we had a case in Ohio. And I went, oh, this is real.
Yeah, remember how weird that seemed?
Yeah, it just seemed like, what? You're going to close schools, you're going to do this? And I'm like, you close school, anytime a school's closed, kids don't get fed. In some cases, 2 meals a day. So we're like, uh-oh. So we basically pulled out our disaster plan that we do for hurricane disasters and things like that when we help. We have 2 truck drivers right now in Fort Myers, helping with the Fort Myers Foodbank do deliveries to people right now. So we had that kind of disaster planning work, and we went and bought food. But at the same time, we asked the governor for help, because you got to remember, not only did we have the challenge of keeping our team safe, we lost our volunteers. Overnight, they were told corporations stay home, senior citizens stay home, stay safe, there's no vaccination. And we made an appeal in March of 20 to the governor, and we got the National Guard. And I remember being on a Sunday call with the other food banks in Ohio, and we're debating, hey, we're going to do this. How many do people want? And the Association of Food Banks is trying to compile that. And everybody else says, well, I could use 5, I can use 10. I said, I want 100. Because I got to replace thousands of volunteers that were packing food for seniors every month, running our food distribution sites. And I got 100. We had 100 for 9 months, and then we got to cut to 50. We had them for 15 months, and they were a lifesaver. We even placed them in some of our outline. We had 6 people driving from Steubenville every day. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's 4-hour round trip kind of. So a big agency in Steubenville said, put them there. So that the good news for us, you probably saw a lot of San Antonio and Vegas were the 2 biggest, in Pittsburgh Airport, distributions, people lining up for 10,000 cars in San Antonio trying to get food. And what happened in Vegas was 83% of their agencies closed. 95% of our agencies stayed open. We worked really hard to teach them safe ways to handle food, put it in the trunk of your car, pre-pack it. We did a lot of pre-packing ourselves in the early days. So it was really and we doubled the amount of cleaning staff we had. So I think we closed our pantry one day because we weren't sure our protocols in the early days, and if 2 people removed got COVID, all of a sudden, did you have to do something? Until we figured that out. We never shut our warehouse down once. And a lot of other food banks had to close due to COVID outbreaks and things. But we doubled the cleaning crew, and just said, keep this place clean and keep the guard, who were fantastic, did amazing.
Did you have any outbreaks?
We've had more outbreaks in this last round, I think, with this smaller version than we did in the early days.
Everybody's kind of relaxing.
Everybody, and it's just like all of a sudden you're getting it. In the early days we had a few, I had to keep them out of church, no offense, but that's where they'd go to the church gatherings, and all of a sudden, for the churches that stayed open, and all of a sudden we got COVID coming into the building. But we did really well, but it was a combination of teaching all of our partners the same thing, and how much food could we pre-pack. And we're still using that same model today at the food bank's big pantry, because we can't. It's too many people now to go back inside. It's a small place where we are right now. But it worked, and we got through it, and it was a case, and I had an amazing team of people that just stayed with it. And we had to be very mindful, because we sent everybody home that was in the office. We did everything like everybody else. So how do you set up hybrid work? How do you make sure the computer, how do you make sure there's internet? All the challenges that are today for a lot of people, we talk about, you have internet access. Well, internet access is one thing. Enough bandwidth for 2 people working and kids to be on school, was a problem in a lot of places. And so continuing to expand broadband is a big issue in the world of human services.
That's really big still in Appalachian counties. I swear my sister has a squirrel in her basement. Her internet is awful when I go there. I can't stand it.
Yep.
Now, we know that Thanksgiving is coming up next week. NBC4 is partnering with, I think, Urban One and some other, to do a big food give out, to give out turkeys, to give out food. When people do that, does that ease the burden on you when you see these other charities stepping up? Of course, that's like once or twice a year that they do that, but how important is that for you?
It is very important. I think, it's easier. When I wanted to buy turkeys, it was like, we want, 25,000 turkeys. Well, you can't find 25,000 turkeys. You couldn't find them, and then the price point shot up. They estimated 4% of the turkey market was destroyed by avian flu. Now we've got avian flu in Ohio, and 1 million birds they just, took out, kind of thing. So there were issues, and price of turkey. Go into a grocery store right now and see what the price of turkeys is. I was in one grocery store, and it ranged from 47 cents a pound to $2.29, depending on which brand of turkey you wanted to buy. So there's not as many loss leaders. And so anytime, somebody steps up and does that, particularly at the holidays, what I tell everybody at the end of the day, we all celebrate our food.
Excuse me.
And that's, and yet, if you don't have it, one of our board members, Bobby Mosier, who ran, was the dean at the School of Agriculture at Ohio State for years, was on our board. And he says, you know what? When you don't have food, the only conversation at the dinner table is about food. When you have food, you can have conversation about all kinds of things. And that's the reality for a lot of our families. So in our case, we've had to drop down to big chickens that we could still find, but because the price point, when you go from 78 cents a pound to $2.09 a pound buying turkeys wholesale, all of a sudden, I was talking to somebody, Salvation Army. I was talking to Salvation Army last night, and they said, their turkey price went up $20,000 for just the turkeys they do at their distribution. So it hits, all these charities that are doing this work, the food is more expensive, in which case you can either serve less, you've got to find money, which is really hard to do right now, or you're going to get people, at the end of the day, you're going to give people less food, or you're going to change what you're giving them. And we're going through all of those.
We do have a question today from CEO Magazine and Julianne Hobaugh. Julianne, what's your question? The editor?
Thanks, Colleen. Matt, obviously you guys are giving out more than 80 million pounds of food a year. You have 170 employees. Volunteers are critical to getting all of these hungry people, all of our neighbors fed. Can you talk to us a little bit about the role that volunteers play and the challenge that you have, particularly right now, attracting volunteers to help you fulfill your mission?
Well, I would have said a few months ago it was a really big challenge. The amazing thing right now is we actually have filled our volunteer slots through the end of the year. So if you call as a corporation or a group and want to volunteer, we're telling you to take a holiday IOU and come in in January, February, and March, even to our agency partners, because what we've done is we've got using a local platform called Volunteer Hub, are connecting our agency partners with volunteers so that people can volunteer in hopefully an agency close to your home. And that kind of way to do it. But it's an ongoing challenge. Our volunteers do everything from, we pack 6,000 senior boxes every month. So it's federal food that we get that goes out to seniors, and they've got to be packed. So we've got a wonderful little pack room that packs it up. We take a lot of product in from, you think, Amazon, Big Lots, Target, the distribution centers, and we got to sort through all of that product. Kroger, they've all had, whatever their damage recovery system is, and we get donations. We're able to bring that product in, but it's got to be checked, sorted, make sure it's still safe, that you don't have a bulging can, you don't have a package that got broken open, those kind of things. And most recently, we're using a lot of, we use volunteers in our kitchen because we're cooking, 4,000 or 5,000 meals a day, that are still going out to after-school programs, Christopher Way school system, summer feeding kinds of programs. So we use a lot of volunteers in the kitchen to pack that up. And then a lot of volunteers at our two main distribution sites, Grove City and Norton Road, are working the actual markets, to hand out food. So it's a combination of all of those kinds of things. And then we have a lot of talented individual volunteers that we put into much more, how do you help us in IT? How do you help us in development? How do you, wherever those opportunities are, Marilyn, who ran our marketing program for us for, years, brought in I called them all her PR peeps, to really rebranded ourselves to the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, and we did all that in-house with a lot of help from her compadres, around the community, given that talent to how we rethink who we are. So there probably isn't a facet of our organization that's not touched by volunteers. But our 700 partners often need a lot of help, and particularly if you do these extra distributions.
Yeah. My son, between college and law school, did a year with, I think through AmeriCorps. He wanted to do a gap year at Mid-Ohio. And it was really a learning experience for him as well. How much do you rely on programs like that, college interns or AmeriCorps people, to support the work that you do?
All of them. I mean, starting with, we picked up a lot, even at the high school level. We had always had Cristo Rey students, but when the corporation shut down, we went from getting 2 to 10, I think we had at the heyday. So we had a lot of more students, even at high school. And the thing that we've embedded into our thinking is it has to be a meaningful experience for them. Do not give them busy work, to do. So we've done that. When Garrett was there, AmeriCorps was really, we've hired a bunch of the people that came out of AmeriCorps. So it was their foray in. Some of those people came because I couldn't find a job during the recession, 08, 09, that kind of time period. Others, it was a gap year. Give them, and I remember he analyzed how we were acquiring all of our government food for us. Because it's like, in our world, we live in this world of food banking of pounds. Well, pounds don't mean much to anybody in the food industry. It's just, unless you're buying a hamburger or something by the pound, most of the time you don't track it that way. So it's very easy to fall into traps about heavier is better than more. If you want to be a bigger food bank, you can get heavier product. What are we really doing in the decision making? So he did an analysis of all that for him. Took all the food sources we were getting from USDA, looked at the products, what we were doing, and matrixed that all out. So it was a meaningful experience, useful work for us. We depend very heavily on that. We love having people, they're passionate, they come in, they want to help. We hire a lot of interns. We've had IT interns from a number of colleges come in and do data analytics work with us, from Denison, from Ohio State. We've got the MBOE program at Ohio State that's doing, I think, 4 or 5 projects every year with us. We give them a really difficult, meaningful question. And these are MBA students of multifaceted that work on this for us. So we tap all of those talents, because at the end of the day, we can't pay for all that. And if we can bring that level of talent in, introduce work to high school kids, right now a lot of high school kids in where I live don't work. Parents don't make them work, and I think they should. And so it's a case where tap that talent, give them a meaningful experience, and they'll take a piece of us with them no matter where they go.
I know people have undoubtedly recruited you over the years for your experience, your managerial, your logistic knowledge. So how have you resisted going to the private sector?
Well, for a lot of years in the middle of this, I was also city council, and I was president of city council for 7 of those years. So it's really hard to tell an employer, oh, by the way, I won't be around half the time because I got to be at City Hall, and can't do a lot of night stuff because I got to do all this political stuff at night. So it made it easy to say no to everybody because nobody wanted a half-time employee. And now I just love what I'm doing. I've been, the question I get probably more often is, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, I have no desire to retire. I love what I'm doing. I got an amazing team of people. The work is constantly changing. If this was still in just the logistics of moving food and not into this and how do we go upstream? How do we take a food distribution? And then, the one we're looking at on the east side, we'll hopefully have a federally qualified health center in this, workforce development, drug and alcohol rehab, those kind of programs around us, as a market and a kitchen strategy on the east side. It's really around all those wraparound services so that we can help stabilize families using food. So for me, it's, I often say, if all we did in our system was do a good job of getting you food the first time, you had the courage, when you talk about stigma, to cross, if all we did is give you food, we didn't do enough. I was talking to Michelle last night at her retirement, from the shelter board, and we talked about that. We were her canary in the mine, because when pantry numbers started climbing, it wasn't very far down the path you were going to see evictions and homelessness climb. So how do we do something way upstream? How do we get people to understand that prevention matters as opposed to treatment? We're a treatment-built society. So for us, we're trying to reinvent ourselves as a low-cost, high-value healthcare strategy. because we've proven that we can lower numbers of diabetes with regular access to fresh food for people that are food insecure. Why not? There's $8,000 cost savings annually for the people in healthcare that have diabetes for a 1-point drop in your A1Cs. Give us a couple $100 of that and I can keep moving produce, into that family. So it makes economic sense, it makes healthcare sense, but we got to transform healthcare from sick care to healthcare. And I spent 9 years on Mount Carmel's board, so I learned more than I should in terms of how hard this is. But it's a different way of thinking, and for me, I love all of that. So I was like, why would I go do anything else? My golf game stinks, so I don't want to retire. So at the end of the day, I got an amazing group of people, and there's still more to contribute in terms of how do we really wrestle with today's tough challenges.
Well, we are happy to hear that you are staying where we need you to be. I know we're out of time now, but just one quick final question. What should we be doing to help you?
I think the biggest thing to do is to really help with the stigma issue, help with raising awareness of the challenge and saying we can do better. There's no reason why in Columbus, Ohio, we're going to have the opposite challenge of the rest of the country when we go into a recession, because we're trying to fill a bunch of, I sit on the workforce with Don, we sit on the Workforce Development Board, and we're looking at not just Intel, but all these other companies that are still in growth mode. Healthcare has a lot of need for people, and I'm a big fan of training people to go into healthcare because it's scattered sites, so you can stay close to home and we don't have to transport you to Licking County, kind of thing. So there's a piece in that about we've got to change the conversation in this country. We got to quit blaming poor people for their plight. We've really got to recognize where half of America is and how do we go on a journey together, as opposed to, well, I pull myself up by my bootstraps, and therefore everybody has to do that. So to me, it's that. It really is about how do we change the conversations and stop blaming people for their plight. It's too easy. Stop judging is the thing that I often tell people. Just stop judging them and help.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. Wasn't he great? Thank you.